You stand in silence beside your grandfather's casket, the only person who ever truly believed you could do something great. While the sweet scent of honey still lingers in your childhood memories, your family speaks only of selling Honey Ridge Farm for cash. And then, as the lawyer reads the will, you rise unexpectedly, declaring you will keep the farm with the savings you've guarded for 6 long years. Laughter ripples through the room, sharp and dismissive, but you know this is the only way to protect his legacy. That moment marked the beginning of your journey, a path everyone else called impossible. If you wish to walk through this story with me, a gentle like or subscribe is more than enough for us to continue together. The laughter still rang in your ears when you picked up the pen and signed the papers to buy Honey Ridge. In that moment, though the entire room looked at you as if you were delusional, a spark ignited inside. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about proving yourself to the family. Deep down, you knew this farm was the only place still holding warmth, memory, and the quiet love of your grandfather Henry. The old car rumbled to life as you drove down the winding road leading back to Honey Ridge. The fields that once shimmered green now stood dry, wild weeds creeping over the land. The farmhouse loomed ahead, grey, sagging, with broken shutters sealed tight beneath layers of dust. You stepped out, the chill of October wind carrying the damp smell of earth. It felt almost like the past whispering a greeting. Walking around the house, you ran your fingers along the weathered walls. Each beam, each worn corner sparked memories. Mornings when Henry led you to the hives, teaching you to hear bees as though they were music. But now their old boxes lay shattered, wooden frames collapsed, with only a few lost bees buzzing weakly in the wind. The sight tightened your chest, painful, yes, but also awakening. Something had to be done. That afternoon, you visited Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor who had lived beside Honey Ridge for half her life. She welcomed you with a kind smile, though her eyes betrayed concern. Henry always said, if you ever wanted to bring the farm back, you'd need Thomas Hale. He knows every acre, every hive. Her hand, thin and trembling, rested on your shoulder. But Thomas won't be easy to convince. He thinks everyone gives up before the hard work truly begins. The name stirred memories of Henry and Thomas side by side, hauling jars of honey into town. You knew you had to find him. The next morning, you stood before Thomas's modest house. He opened the door, silver hair framing a face lined with both age and wisdom. His sharp eyes studied you as you spoke about restoring Honey Ridge. He shook his head. Girl, you don't know what you're asking. That farm is spent. If your whole family couldn't keep it alive, how could you? Close quote. You stayed silent, then handed him the worn journal you had found in the dust of Henry's room. Its pages, yellowed and fragile, carried careful notes, experiments and breeding bees, hopes written between worries. Thomas turned each page slowly, his hands trembling. His expression softened, his voice almost breaking. Well, if Henry believed you could, I suppose I'll give it a try. From that day forward, a new chapter began. The first task was cleaning. Rotting wood, collapsed hive frames, layers of dirt collected through years of neglect. You and Thomas worked side by side, hauling debris and propping up new stands. Your hands blistered, shoulders ached, yet every time fatigue pulled you down, you remembered Henry's steady eyes, urging you on. In the mornings, you followed Thomas to the fields, learning to observe. Bees aren't just honey makers, close quote, he told you. They're the heart of the farm. Keep them alive, and Honey Ridge lives. You learned to listen to the hum, to tell by sound whether the colony thrived or suffered. The first time you opened a hive, the air filled with hundreds of bees. You froze, terrified and awestruck all at once. Thomas chuckled gently. See? They aren't here to harm you. They only need someone who cares. Days stretched into weeks. You carried loan applications to banks, only to be dismissed with polite smiles. They didn't believe a young woman could shoulder the burden of a failing farm. Delia called, her voice dripping with scorn. You'll quit soon enough. Don't make yourself miserable. Her words cut deep, but instead of surrendering, you clenched your fists, your resolve sharpening. While clearing the old storage shed, you stumbled upon a wooden box. Inside lay Henry's secret notes, pages describing a strain of disease-resistant bees he had been developing. Thomas's eyes widened as he read. Henry left you the key. This is the real inheritance. In that moment, you realized your duty wasn't only to rebuild Honey Ridge, but to carry forward the treasure Henry had trusted you to guard. Time passed. Your palms hardened, your skin browned in the sun, but slowly, laughter returned to your lips. New hives buzzed with life. On the first harvest, thick amber honey flowed from the frames, catching sunlight like liquid gold. You stared in awe, as if watching Henry's faith come alive again. That evening, you sat alone in the small kitchen, opening the very first jar. You dipped a spoon, tasting the sweetness on your tongue. Tears spilled, not from exhaustion, but from the sense of connection, the invisible bridge to the man who had believed in you when no one else did. You knew the road ahead remained long, filled with storms yet to come. But in that moment, Honey Ridge was alive again in your heart. And you understood. When a seed is planted in faith, it will push through stone and shadow to bloom. And what about you? Have you ever been dismissed, laughed at for choosing your own path? What would you do? Quit to appease others, or press forward to prove yourself? Share your thoughts below. Perhaps your story will give courage to someone else. And if this journey resonates with you, even a quiet like or subscribe, nothing loud, nothing forced, will be enough for us to keep walking together. The first jars of honey brought you indescribable joy. Sweet, golden, glowing in the autumn sun, it was proof that every sleepless night, every blistered hand, had not been in vain. But sweetness never lasts long. As word spread through the town that Honey Ridge was alive again, your family returned. Not with open arms, but with eyes that measured profit. They walked across the farm, assessing every detail. Your father tapped his cane on the ground, muttering, "I didn't expect it to hold this much value. Maybe we should see it as a family operation again." Delia smiled coldly, her eyes cutting toward you. "You've done well, but don't forget this foundation has always belonged to us." Each word stung like a blade. A foundation. The same foundation they abandoned, the same soil only Henry and you had tended. Where were they during the nights of scraping rot from old hive boxes, the mornings of bleeding hands? You pressed your lips shut. Silence was safer. Yet they mistook silence for surrender. One evening, as you flipped on the TV, your chest clenched. On the local news, Delia stood tall, microphone in hand, radiant under stage lights. "Honey Ridge Farm is our family's heritage," flows quote, she declared proudly. "Together, my sister and I revived it." Every syllable struck like a slap. You sat in the dim kitchen, gripping the old toy microphone, heart hammering against your ribs. Once again, your sister's shadow threatened to erase you. Thomas arrived quietly, resting his weathered hand on your shoulder. "Don't waste your strength arguing. Let the truth speak for itself. Let the honey prove you right." His voice carried the weight of both memory and faith. You looked into his eyes and saw the same conviction Henry once carried. That night, you decided Honey Ridge would stand at Harvest Festival. And only then would there be no denying whose work it truly was. The days of preparation were grueling. You stayed up past midnight, labeling jars, wiping every glass clean until it gleamed. The booth was simple, wood-polished and decorated with a hand-carved sign. Honey Ridge Farm Heritage Reborn. Each stroke of the lettering was a vow. Honey Ridge would not be forgotten. Honey Ridge would shine again, this time under your name. When the festival day dawned, the sky was flawless, the fields glowing gold. Crowds surged across the fairgrounds, stalls bursting with color and sound. You stood behind your booth, hands trembling as passers-by glanced at the jars. Delia arrived too, wrapped in an elegant dress, greeting guests with a smile sharp as glass. She leaned close to someone nearby and whispered loudly enough for you to hear. "Watch. She'll learn what failure feels like in front of everyone." The tension snapped when the results were announced. The hall fell silent as the head judge declared, "The Heritage Revival Award goes to Honey Ridge Farm." For a heartbeat, time froze. Then applause thundered, cameras flashed, and you stepped onto the stage, certificate in hand. Light bathed your face, and for the first time, people looked at you not through your sister, not through your family, but at you. Delia pushed forward, her voice trembling. You really did this." Close quote. You held out the papers, proof of paid ownership, and smiled softly. "Honey Ridge belongs to me. And it always will." The words floated gently, but their weight landed like thunder. The crowd witnessed, and no one could deny it. Your family stood mute, disappointment etched across their faces. Yet in your heart, there was no anger anymore. Only peace, the kind that comes when the world finally sees you. But life rarely stays in light for long. As winter's chill set in, Thomas fell ill. You sat beside his bed, holding his rough hands as he whispered, "Don't be afraid, you're strong enough." Henry believed, and so do I. He pressed a thick folder into your hands, his final notes, long-term plans for the farm. Weeks later, he slipped away quietly, leaving silence in his place. At the small funeral, the wind whipped across the hills. You hung Thomas's hat beside Henry's photo in the farmhouse. Two fathers of spirit, two guiding stars gone, yet not extinguished. Grief washed over you, but within it, a fire stirred. They had entrusted you with more than land. They had entrusted you with belief. Even in mourning, your family returned. They spoke of partnerships and honoring tradition. But this time, you stood straight, your voice steady. "Honey Ridge is not a bargaining chip. It is my promise. If you only want profit, leave." Their words faltered. They turned away, leaving you in the old wooden house, but this time filled with light instead of shadow. That night, you opened a jar of honey, the golden liquid catching firelight. Thomas's final words echoed, "Don't let your voice be buried." You realized the path ahead was long, storms still waiting. Yet you also knew, now, your voice could no longer be silenced. And what about you? Have you ever been erased, overshadowed, treated like someone else's shadow? Would you accept silence or rise so that your light could finally break through? If you've ever felt that ache, share your story below. Your words might become the comfort someone else needs. And if this journey resonates with you, a simple like or subscribe, quiet, effortless, will be enough to let me know you are here, walking this path beside me. After Thomas's quiet funeral, Honey Ridge felt hollow, as if the farmhouse itself had lost its soul. You stepped into the fields, winter winds lashing across the barren land, branches broken as though bowing in farewell. Each step crunched on thin ice, reminding you that loneliness had now become your constant companion. Inside the wooden house, Thomas's hat hung neatly beside Henry's faded photograph. Two spiritual fathers, two guiding lanterns, now lived only in memory and in your eyes. On long winter nights, you sat alone at the table, turning the pages of Thomas's thick notebook. Among the messy scribbles, you found a hurried line. Do not fear when darkness surrounds you. Bees always find the light, and so will you. Reading it again and again, you heard his voice, deep, steady, pulling you back from despair. News of your festival victory lingered, drawing more visitors. Schoolchildren rushed in, eyes wide as they watched the bees up close. You crouched low, patiently explaining. Bees are not only honey makers, they are guardians of balance, of a world's rhythm. In their awe, you saw your younger self, when Henry first led you to the hives, and fear gave way to wonder. Then came the townspeople, the shopkeepers. They tasted the honey, marveling at its light sweetness, unlike anything else they knew. One woman smiled and whispered, "This carries the flavor of the meadows." You smiled back, because that was your wish. Not just to sell honey, but to share memory, to preserve the soul of this land in each golden drop. Seasons passed, and Honey Ridge grew from a small farm into a destination. Newspapers wrote of heritage reborn. Television invited you to share your story. Sitting before the camera, you spoke calmly, no longer with the trembling voice of someone unseen, but with the quiet strength of one who had walked through shadow and found her light again. Each word you spoke wasn't only about bees or soil, but about holding on to faith when the world turns its back. Yet, when you returned home after those appearances, silence pressed in once more. Opening the door, you heard only wind slipping through cracks in the wood. You remembered Thomas, remembered Henry, remembered the sound of laughter over an old pot of tea. But within that stillness, you learned to converse with yourself. The beating of your heart, the steady breath in your chest, like the hum inside the hives, reminded you that you still existed, existing for a promise. One afternoon, while checking the new hives, a boy approached. His face was shy, his eyes bright. He handed you a piece of paper. "Miss, I heard your story. I often feel invisible too. Can you teach me how to find my voice?" Close quote. You froze. The short note pierced your memory like a needle. Kneeling down, you took his small hand and whispered, "Your voice is already here. If you believe in it, it will be heard." In that moment, you realized Honey Ridge was no longer just your story. It had become a haven for others, for those who once felt lost, a place to find hope and begin again. Sometimes, Delia returned. This time, her eyes no longer glinted with arrogance, but carried the shadow of regret. She hesitated. You've done something I never thought possible. Maybe I was wrong." You looked at her, your heart soft yet cautious. Forgiveness did not mean letting her claim Honey Ridge. But for the first time, you saw acknowledgement in her gaze. The days moved forward, and you continued expanding Honey Ridge. You built educational programs, inviting students, welcoming communities to learn about bees, about nature's delicate bond with humanity. People remembered Honey Ridge not only as a farm, but as a symbol of belief reborn, of heritage reclaimed. One evening, sunset painted the sky gold. You stood watching the bees swell, their wings catching light like tiny sparks in the air. Inside, you heard that familiar voice. "Do not let your voice be buried." And you smiled, for now your voice was no longer echoing inside an empty house. It was carried outward, reaching hearts beyond your own. And you wondered how many others out there have felt invisible, dismissed, forgotten. If they walked into Honey Ridge today, would they too discover hope, the way you once did? Honey Ridge entered a new season. In the gentle warmth of spring, the fields stretched wide with lavender and sunflowers, their fragrance drifting across the valley, mingling with the restless hum of bees. Children still ran through the grass, their laughter carrying in the wind, while elders from town came just to sit on a long wooden bench beneath the porch and watch the hives. You walked past them, hearing conversations, soft chuckles, and you realized the farm was no longer a place you bore alone. It had become the heart of a community, beating in rhythm with many lives. Every morning, when the sun rose above the hills, gold light flooded the farmhouse roof. You opened the door and breathed deeply, letting the crisp air fill you. The hum of bees rose like a private symphony, a greeting to the new day. Sometimes you stood still, letting that sound wash over you, as if it were your own heartbeat. Once, you had been someone hidden in shadows. Now, you had created a space where others could come and find faith. News of Honey Ridge traveled beyond town borders. Newspapers called the farm a symbol of rebirth, close quote, a place where grief was transformed into hope. Reporters came asking, what kept you here when everyone else walked away? Close quote, you smiled softly and answered, I heard the bees, and I knew I was never truly alone. That simple reply spread far, quoted again and again, not just as an explanation, but as a message to anyone still stumbling in the dark. One day, an invitation arrived. You were asked to speak at a conference on sustainable farming. Under the harsh glow of stage lights, with hundreds of faces before you, you told your story, not polished, not hidden. You spoke of sleepless nights, of calloused hands, of rejection after rejection, and finally, of a small but enduring belief as delicate as a bee's wing that carried you forward. When you finished, the audience rose in applause. In that moment, you were no longer the child laughed at by her family. You were living proof that even in solitude, a person can build an entire world. The days moved forward, and you continued expanding Honey Ridge. You built educational programs, inviting students, welcoming communities to learn about bees, about nature's delicate bond with humanity. People remembered Honey Ridge not only as a farm, but as a symbol of belief reborn, of heritage reclaimed. One evening, sunset painted the sky gold. You stood watching the bees swirl, their wings catching light like tiny sparks in the air. Inside, you heard that familiar voice. Do not let your voice be buried. And you smiled, for now your voice was no longer echoing inside an empty house. It was carried outward, reaching hearts beyond your own. And you wondered how many others out there have felt invisible, dismissed, forgotten. If they walked into Honey Ridge today, would they too discover hope, the way you once did? Honey Ridge entered a new season. In the gentle warmth of spring, the fields stretched wide with lavender and sunflowers, their fragrance drifting across the valley, mingling with the restless hum of bees. Children still ran through the grass, their laughter carrying in the wind, while elders from town came just to sit on the long wooden bench beneath the porch and watch the hives. You walked past them, hearing conversations, soft chuckles, and you realized the farm was no longer a place you bore alone. It had become the heart of a community, beating in rhythm with many lives. Every morning, when the sun rose above the hills, gold light flooded the farmhouse roof. You opened the door and breathed deeply, letting the crisp air fill you. The hum of bees rose like a private symphony, a greeting to the new day. Sometimes you stood still, letting that sound wash over you, as if it were your own heartbeat. Once, you had been someone hidden in shadows. Now, you had created a space where others could come and find faith. News of Honey Ridge traveled beyond town borders. Newspapers called the farm a symbol of rebirth, close quote, a place where grief was transformed into hope. Reporters came asking, what kept you here when everyone else walked away? Close quote, you smiled softly and answered, I heard the bees, and I knew I was never truly alone. That simple reply spread far, quoted again and again, not just as an explanation, but as a message to anyone still stumbling in the dark. One day, an invitation arrived. You were asked to speak at a conference on sustainable farming. Under the harsh glow of stage lights, with hundreds of faces before you, you told your story, not polished, not hidden. You spoke of sleepless nights, of calloused hands, of rejection after rejection, and finally, of a small but enduring belief as delicate as a bee's wing that carried you forward. When you finished, the audience rose in applause. In that moment, you were no longer the child laughed at by her family. You were living proof that even in solitude, a person can build an entire world. Yet, when you returned to Honey Ridge, Delia stood at the gate. No glittering dresses, only a simple coat, her face weary. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she whispered, I was wrong. I was jealous, and I hurt you. You froze, heart tightening, old memories flooding back her mockery, her dismissal. But in her gaze, for the first time, you saw truth. Regret. You did not answer right away. Instead, you led her along the rows of hives. Bees swirled tirelessly, their wings catching the light. You pointed to them and said, they don't ask who matters more. Each one does its part. If a bee tries to prove it's greater than the rest, the hive collapses. Delia bowed her head, tears spilling freely. You didn't embrace her, nor did you turn away. You left her there in silence, like a door cracked open. Forgiveness might begin, but trust takes time. Afterward, you poured your strength into expanding Honey Ridge. A greenhouse rose, where children planted small flowers for the bees to visit. A classroom was carved from the old farmhouse, its walls hung with photographs of Henry and Thomas. When you spoke of them, you called them the two teachers of Honey Ridge. Listeners sat quietly, eyes shining with respect not only for the past, but for the journey you had carried into the present. Gradually, Honey Ridge became a place people longed to see. Not just to buy honey, but to hear the story, to touch the soil of faith. Children wrote small letters. Miss, because of you, I know being different still has value. Adults confessed softly. This place reminds us failure is not the end. You read each one and understood Honey Ridge had outgrown the walls of a farm. It had become a symbol. One evening, as sunset blazed red across the valley, you sat on the porch steps. Before you, bees flew in golden light, their wings glittering like falling stars. On the table, jars of honey stood in rows, catching the last rays, glowing like lanterns in the dusk. Inside those jars lived more than sweetness, they held fragments of memory. Henry's hands, Thomas's laughter, the shy eyes of the boy searching for his voice, and even Delia's tears. You reached out, fingers brushing one jar, and your heart trembled. Within it was not only honey, but the bitters endured, the times you stood up from collapse, the long nights of faith. You wondered, do people only discover themselves when forced through shadow? If you had not been dismissed, would you stand this strong today? Without loss, would you treasure every drop of honey, every fragile hum in the air? The answer remained uncertain. Yet one truth pulsed clear. Honey Ridge was living proof that from what seems broken, people can rebuild. If they hold faith, patience, and courage, they can turn ashes into life. And in that evening glow, bees still flew, honey still glistened, and your voice, the voice once buried, now carried outward. No longer confined to the old wooden house, it reached into the hearts of those who came seeking something precious. The belief that life can begin again, even from ruin. As night slowly settled over the valley, you sat quietly on the porch, the last rays of sunset still lingering on jars of golden honey. The gentle hum of bees filled the still air, blending with the rustle of wind like a timeless melody of life itself. In each sound, you could hear the echoes of your journey. The sting of being dismissed, the strength of reclaiming your voice, and the rebirth of Honey Ridge. You closed your eyes and smiled. Not the smile of victory, but the quiet smile of a soul that has learned to rise after being broken. You knew the road ahead was still long, yet fear no longer held you. For now, your voice was no longer hidden, it resonated, not only within the wooden farmhouse, but within the hearts of those who had come to Honey Ridge seeking hope.